When the Peace Tower clock chimed midnight on January 1st, one of the biggest tax increases in years took effect. There was no announcement, and most Canadians would never notice. Cabinet raised tariffs on popular goods Canadians buy at the mall: clothing, small appliances, and housewares imported from China and South Asia. It was the biggest tax increase in tariffs since 1974, worth $1 billion over 5 years.
When you go pay for something at the store, you pay GST, that's a tax. A tariff is really just a tax at the wholesale level. So that's going to get incorporated into the price that consumers have to pay at the end of the day.
Parliament needed the money. It hadn't balanced a budget since 2007. Canadians were unlikely to complain, since most shopped on credit anyway. Household debt is at record levels, more than $1.5 trillion. The average Canadian owes $1.63 for every dollar they earn.
The debt-to-income ratio at 163% is at an all-time high. It's doubled since 1990. It's 20% higher since 2008. Now, that doesn't mean everybody is vulnerable, but there's at least a couple of million families at the lower to median income levels who are vulnerable. What if interest rates go up? What if gas prices go up? What if they lose their job?
We have some concern. This is an issue we have been tracking for some time, and there are no doubt there are some households that are overextended.
Rising household indebtedness is tracked by the Bank of Canada. From 1990, slowly but steadily, Canadians borrowed to record levels, higher than the United States or United Kingdom. One government survey asked, "What would your family do if required to come up with $5,000 in an emergency?" Only 21% had savings. 36% would use a credit card. Others said they'd have to sell an asset, or simply could not handle it.
Half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. If they lose one paycheck, or if that paycheck gets reduced, what are they going to do? And if you look at their balance sheets or their income statements, you'll see how much they're spending towards servicing that debt. That's not a safe position to be in.
There is not a lot of attention paid to debt. Debt is not treated with very much seriousness. It's sort of invisible. People don't see it in front of them, and therefore it's not factored into their everyday decision making. This is of course true at the personal level for a lot of people in their households, but it's especially true at the political level, where there is a huge upside to being able to spend money that you don't have to account for because it's not your problem, it's a problem for someone else.
Since the last election in 2011, the economy created 500,000 jobs. High commodity prices helped. Since the last election, the price of oil has fallen by more than half. The price of wheat is down 14%. In parts of Canada without wheat or oil, unemployment has averaged 10% or more.
The Maritimes are actually in the worst shape. In terms of GDP per capita, in terms of growth, in terms of opportunity, in terms of unemployment, it's higher. And so I would be, I think, much more depressed if I was living in the Maritimes. I would be giving you a more pessimistic story.
Look, if the economy grows well, we get a lot of job creation, house prices stay up, life is good, and this isn't a big problem. But if the economy stagnates, interest rates go up, house prices go down, it's a significant problem.
We need to remind Canadians that historically low interest rates will not be there forever, that interest rates really only have one way to go, and that's up.
The Bank of Canada kept rates low for fear of damaging the economy. Mortgages sell at less than 3%, and the bank governor used reassuring words in public.
First of all, we don't believe we're in a bubble. There are many other characteristics of a bubble situation which are not present.
Privately, the bank is worried over what would happen in a labor market shock if unemployment across Canada was the same 10% as it is in the Maritimes.
I don't think that we're necessarily fine. We've grown in terms of our net worth on paper, and that's probably a good thing, but it's not necessarily liquid growth. And if people are going out and spending all day long and they're buying and they're being consumers, if you will, and they're not living within their means and they're using their homes as cash registers, that's not necessarily a good thing.
More shock scenarios are cited in this Bank of Canada document released through Access to Information. They tried to blank out the page. It says, if interest rates were to rise 325 basis points by mid-2015, that would put mortgages at 6%, a normal rate a decade ago. The share of highly indebted households would rise to roughly 10%.
In 1982, I bought a house, and I thought I was lucky because the builder bought down the mortgage to 16%. When I say that to my kids these days, they look at me like I'm from Mars, with interest rates where they are today.
Middle-class incomes have been flat for years, but living costs and household debt have ballooned, and that we hear that on a weekly basis about the amount of debt Canadians are carrying.
I draw to the House's attention 4 articles that just randomly came out of the paper. The first one is entitled, today's Globe and Mail, New Alarm Bells Over Household Debt as Canada Faces Downward Spiral, talking about how the single biggest jump in household debt-to-income ratios of any country other than Greece between 2007 and 2014.
From a consumer standpoint, I think that we've blurred the lines between needs and wants to the point where wants are really driving our buying patterns and is throwing us into debt.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague talks about household debt, and yes, household debt is a concern, but I can tell you that the majority of that debt is in mortgages. That's an investment that will be going up in value over the years, and that with low interest rates, Canadians are able to afford that.
We could expect if interest rates go up, and I do believe interest rates will go up over the next 4 to 5 years, there's going to be some of those people that will make the adjustment by simply defaulting and going bankrupt.
Politically, how does that play for a government? If you're a government that says, under us, inflation is low, you're able to get a mortgage at 3%, for a lot of people, that makes it easier for them to buy a house, whether or not they really should be buying a house or not.
The Bank of Canada knows Canadians spend too much, but keeps interest rates low to help the economy. The economy is not growing much, so Canadians borrow more to keep up their standard of living. And no one is certain when it will end.
All the economists in the finance department and the IMF and the OECD are predicting continued slowing in the economy. This is going to act as a drag on the economy, which is going to reduce government growth rates. The growth rate in the GDP, which is going to reduce the growth rate of tax revenues for government to spend.
What would happen if I lost my job? What would happen if interest rates went up? What would happen if my house price went down? And I know it's a pretty, perhaps risk-averse and conservative approach, but I think that's the type of discussion that individual families have to have.
I was taking my car in to be repaired, and this gentleman, very charismatic, really nice guy. We got into a conversation, and he's telling me, I said, why are you working? It sounds like you would rather be retired. And he said, well, I have to work. My pension and everything. And he came from a good job and he retired. He said, I have to work to do things more than just pay my bills.
There's a very good possibility that in my own generation, CPP and OAS will run out of money. And so people of my generation may not even be able to access the programs that people who are currently now reaching retirement will be able to access. And so, it's very, very dangerous for the government to send the signal that you don't need to save for your retirement, we'll be there later, when in fact, they may not be there later at all.